Tendau Tηλέμαχος pepneumenos āντιον ηὐδα ξεῖν ἐπεὶ ταῦταμανε αίρα de μεταλλᾷς μέλλεν men ποτε οἶκος hod ἀφνειος kai ἀμύμων ἐμμεναι ofrati kεῖνος ἀνείρ ἐπιδήμιος εΐεν nun ἑτέρως ἐβόλοντο θεοὶ κακὰ μητιόωντες hoi kεῖνον men ἀίστον ἐποίησαν περιπάντων ανθρωπών ἐπεὶ κεθαλόντιπερ hod ακακόημεν μεταλλᾷς ἑτέρως δαμέτρον εν ιδέμω φιλόν εν κέρσεν ἐπεὶ πολεμon τολεπαύσεν. Okay, so pepneumenos Telemachus said back to her, stranger, since you ask and inquire about these things, this household once was destined to be rich and fine, while that man was still at home. Now the gods have wished otherwise, plotting evil things, who have made him invisible beyond all other men. For I would not be so upset if he had died, if he had been overcome with his companions in the land of the Trojans, or in the hands of his dear ones after he had completed the war. Literally, if he had wound down the skein of the war,
nice.
Something from,
Nice.
Weaving,
wool
yeah.
and
Yeah.
weaving.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's as far as I went.
Yep.
So, modifications, questions? Ἀμύμων is an interesting word. I forgot what I did with it. I
You
said
did
fine.
yeah, which is interesting.
Oh, could I just say that I think people make too much of a thing about translating ἀμύμων as blameless. They shouldn't translate it as blameless because in English it just means, well, you can't blame me, so if I'm blameless, I'm innocent. But that's just not where it is. I think if we go to sacrificial language,
Right.
and you pick the animal that is
No blemishes.
without blemish,
Yeah.
and therefore is prime sacrifice.
That's Tηλέμαχος.
That's what ἀμύμων is, and then how it gets transferred to humans is where it then gets tricky and whatnot. But it's still the idea of not faultless in the moral sense, but
Right.
faultless in the sense of blemishless.
Right.
Blemishness.
Lessness.
So that's why you can use it of Aegisthus and Salmonius.
Yeah, because
They were straplings.
They were straplings. And in the end, he was a pretty good person to sacrifice because he was good looking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not that he was morally
Corrupt or
morally
imperfect or
perfect. No.
Yeah. Nice. Okay.
And it's interesting that the ἀίστον is, what Telemachus comments on, that, that the gods have made him more invisible than anyone. And meaning, it's an interesting way to say that he's not here.
But it so expresses the frustration, as nobody has seen any trace of him.
Yeah, exactly.
He's gone without a trace. Nobody is.
And also, I think that there's a verbal equivalent of this, ἀιστώ, I think, to make invisible, which does mean to destroy.
To deep six
Yes.
someone.
Yes.
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 So it's a combination of he's not here and he's dead.
I was amused that you did ξεῖν here as I think you said stranger instead of you got away from the guest host thing.
I did, yeah.
But that was not intentional. I think it was
No.
just another way to do it.
Yes, exactly. It's picking among the two necessary components. And
I think that's okay too, because common decency, Homeric style, requires that you treat even a stranger as a guest.
Guest.
That's
Right.
common decency.
That's
And
it.
so whether you translate it in any given moment as stranger or guest doesn't really matter.
One implies the other. Yeah. Anything else here?
Yeah. Κακά, you translated
Upset.
upset. But it seems to me that what he's saying is that I don't disagree, but
No, well,
I think
I'm perfectly willing to change that.
But I think it's that it's worse than death. What's happened to him, right? If he died in Troy, it wouldn't be as bad as now, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Because there'd be a social,
Yes, there's no closure here,
Right.
That's in our terms, right?
That's right.
So
That if he died in Troy, he would have had a proper burial.
yep. And now it's an open wound. There's no he doesn't know where he is in respect to his own identity or how to behave, right? That's where she comes in.
And that's just very contemporary again to me, that people who, that what they really want to know is, well, in a war situation, the missing in action, the MIAs,
yes.
all the emotion that
Goes with it, yes.
just watching the Vietnam, rerun.
Yes.
Yep.
Anyway.
But I like the metaphor of tăvta's is nice too, because it sort
Nice
of
phrase.
reflects poetry too, right? In a certain sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. The
Completing
Trojan
the
phrase.
tapestry or something.
Yep.
What is it exactly, tolopeo? It's to skein is the idea.
Yeah.
A skein of wool is when you unwind it.
Yeah, it means.
I've forgotten exactly what the mechanics
It's
are.
finished spinning the ball of wool. So you've made the thread and you wound it all up.
Uh-huh.
I think that's what it means.
I forget whether it's to wind up or wind down.
Yeah, it's one or the other.
One or the other.
Yeah.
Right.
It's funny, your text has a movable N at the end, right? The last word.
Tăvta's, yeah.
Yes, and I was going to comment on that earlier when we were talking about it, tolopeusen, when we were talking about enjambment.
Yes.
Because there was an ekusen and then an enjambment afterwards.
Yes.
Meaning that, there's a pause, but there's also a connection.
Yes, well, and that kind of thing freaks us out as philologists, but when you go to an ethnomusicologist, they'll say, well, this happens all the time. But there, it's so much more apparent that that syntax and metrical form can be in conflict with each other,
right.
and that's what makes it beautiful.
Yeah.
That's the art.
Nice. Yeah.
And we don't think of it that way, but I think it's so healthy to see how people who really study performance will say, well, of course. And what Doug read is the way earlier transmission of the text would be, is you'd regularly have movable N at the end of a verb, for example, or a dative plural, or whatever it is, in the scribal tradition.
Okay. We're talking about tolopausin, is that it?
Yes.
We have tolopausin.
And you have just tolopausin?
Yes. Well, that's because I'm using Fantil's text just for the fun of it, to shake things up, because he likes to reconstruct everything back no further than the 9th century CE. And so he'll make choices that Doug's text does not have.
Okay. But anyway, the movable nu kind of emphasizes the pause.
Yes,
right?
It does, beautifully.
So that's what I was thinking, because it was definitely in jammed, the other one. I don't want to go back and find it now.
And you can still have a pause.
You can have the pause. But
by the way, there's a wonderful book by a man called Malcolm Parks called Pause and Effect. Not cause and effect, but pause and effect. And it documents all this kind of thing.
But let me stay with this a little bit longer. I'm still thinking about, maybe I do have to go back and find it, that having the movable nu there, yes, you can say it means a pause, but also it's something that you would have without a pause, to separate the vowels. Because the next line begins with a vowel.
You've got an example right up there.
Can you find it?
226, you have one, and you have also in the one that we
I can't see it.
Is 198. So you have
that's the one I was looking at.
And then agrioi.
That's it.
And this one is ἐπεὶ ἀνάσταλεγέστην ὥστεμoi. Is the way the next line begins.
Okay.
I see what
but
you're
you
saying.
don't always have that.
Nah.
It's not a consistent thing, I don't think.
But I swear to you, if you look at so-called Ptolemaic papyri, you'll just have movable n whenever you can at the end of a line.
Well, I'm just thinking of the pause when you have enjambment. That sure you can pause, but I think that there can be shorter and longer pauses. That's what I would think. I have no evidence that I'm going to point to for this. I'm just going to say that if the sense carries you over to the next line, you're not going to have a heavy pause and then all of a sudden pick up again, the way you would with,
the way I did.
The way with a period. This is the end of a period. A period. This is just intuitive to me that you would want to, Anyway, I'm trying to cut a middle ground here between.
And I think what you're saying is perfectly reasonable, and it's the kind of decision that an actor would make. Is how would Sir Larry perform an enjambment in Hamlet?
Yes.
And I bet he would have just the right instinct about where to pause more briefly and where to pause more lengthily.
It.
So sure.
That's what I'm saying.
I quite agree. In the words of Saussure, that would be more like parole versus langue. That there's a more basic set of systematic requirements, but then you can play with it.